Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you so much for everyone who's in this room right now. Um, we really appreciate your presence here at MVHA. We have a really exciting haiku workshop specifically aimed at teachers by and from a teacher himself, Tom Painting, who has done a few workshops for MVHA before, and we're very excited to have him back. Very excited to get started with that. I know that there are some familiar faces and names in the room, but for people who may not be familiar with Nick Virgilio Haiku Association and what we do, it was founded in 1989 to commemorate the legacy of English haiku poet and Camden native Nick Virgilio. And the MVHA is dedicated to providing free and equitable access to poetry enrichment programs online and to the Camden, New Jersey area in person, with a special focus on haiku. We offer beginner haiku classes for elementary school students in the Camden area, late night poetry practice workshops for young adults, open mics for the community, ginkgo walks, an annual youth haiku contest. Excuse me, I'm going to let somebody in. There we go. All of these things, online workshops, all of this stuff is usually free to the public. So during this particular workshop, we're going to discuss the basics of composing and crafting haiku in English in the classroom, and explore the power of image to evoke emotion
No,
and
तभी तो मैंने हेडफोन डाला है।
position may result in the haiku aha moment. We will call upon some of the haiku written in English by students in a junior high classroom, and a discussion of seasonal awareness and the understanding of Kigo will further enhance our understanding. And people also being part of nature will also provide a focal point as we search for moments, both serious and humorous. So be sure to have a pen and paper ready during this particular workshop because I think it's pretty interactive. So we want
हाँ,
to complete
गानू है तो
exercises.
नहीं दिया है गानू मतलब।
Everybody could just mute their, let me see, make sure everybody is muted. Apologies for that. Okay. Okay, so our workshop leader today will be Tom Painting, who is an American junior high school humanities teacher and haiku poet. If you're into haiku, you probably already know who Tom Painting is, but just in case you don't, we're just briefly going to go over that. He teaches at the Paideia School in Atlanta, Georgia, and his students have had winning haiku in the Nicholas Virgilio Memorial Haiku Contest since 2000. He has many winners actually every year. It's great to read their haiku every year. His haiku have appeared annually since 1998 in the Red Moon anthologies of English language haiku, as well as in Baseball Haiku, the best haiku ever written about the game, A New Resonance 2, Emerging Voices in English Language Haiku, and Haiku in English, The First 100 Years, among others. Tom has also received recognition in the Haiku Society of America's Haiku, Senryu, and Haibun contests. He is an associate editor for the Heron's Nest Haiku Journal and currently resides in Atlanta. And we're happy to have him back with us yet again today for another workshop. Um, what else did I want to say? Oh, the chat. Okay, so if anyone has questions as Tom is speaking, please feel free to put them down into the chat. And what he's going to do is, after everything's said and done, we're going to have a Q&A, and he's just going to scroll up and get to those questions one by one. So he might not, probably won't answer it immediately, but go ahead and leave it in the chat, and we'll make sure that he sees it. Thank you. So Tom, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Oh, good morning, everyone. Yeah, let's get started. I kind of stumbled into haiku almost 30 years ago. Our daughter was about to be born, and my wife and I figured we could kind of bridge the time between her maternity leave and a summer vacation. And the school district I worked for at the time, I taught 30 years in public school up in Rochester, New York, and the district offered 2 sabbaticals. So jokingly, I had a flirtation with haiku prior to this, but I really never took it seriously. So jokingly, I said to my wife, well, why don't I write a proposal to study English language haiku and be the stay-home dad for a year. And between diaper changes and bottle feedings, I should be able to get the work done. And so I wrote it more or less, not as a spoof, but you know, I wasn't 100% serious. And lo and behold, I ended up getting the sabbatical. So now I was on the spot to actually deliver. I will tell you, it was the hardest year of my life staying home with with a 6 or 7 month old baby. But yeah, I mean, it really transformed the way I think about language and especially writing. I think haiku has not only informed my life, but my teaching a great deal. And I hope to share some of that with you today. In an ideal world, we would all be in the same room and we'd be able to pause and ask questions and kind of go on tangents. But that's kind of difficult on Zoom. So as Camille said, if you have questions, just jot them down. And at the end of the presentation, we'll talk things over. But what I'm going to show you today is a haiku workshop. Excuse me. A haiku workshop that I've used, I used with students of all levels. So I've done this workshop with elementary school students. Actually, I did one carry up in Chicago last year. With high school students. When I was in Rochester, I was primarily a high school teacher. Now that I'm doing junior high with junior high students, and actually at the college level. And so if you're familiar with English language haiku, a lot of this is going to be stuff you've seen before, but especially for those of you who are somewhat new or are thinking about using haiku in your classrooms, this is probably a good place to start. Now, I promised Robin Pally from the Virgilia Association, the first thing I would do is try to not dismiss, but dispel a little bit the belief that haiku is written in 3 lines with 17 syllables, 575. How many of you have heard that before? So hands up, you know, I think most of us have. And I think while there's not anything inherently wrong with teaching haiku in that structure, I don't think it works very well when writing in English. So there's a complicated explanation, and it has to do with the structure of language, Japanese to English. And I'm still trying to wrap my mind around that. But there's actually a very easy way, I think, for students to understand why in English we should break from the 17 syllable rule. So we're going to do that now. All right. So I'll start by saying that structurally, the 2 languages are quite different. What we would call a syllable in English, the Japanese call an on, O-N, and that's really just a sound unit. Now, I've been to Japan a couple of times. I'm not fluent in Japanese, but I know enough words and phrases and heard Japanese spoken enough to sort of understand that the language, even to our ears, sounds differently. So if I said to you, good morning in Japanese, it would sound like this, Ohayo gozaimasu. I could greet you with konnichiwa, or I could apologize to you with sumimasen. And so to our ear, the language sounds very sort of almost chopped into small pieces. And that's because the Japanese on, or syllable, that sound unit, each on takes the same duration of time to say. So are you with me so far? So what I'll tell students, we know haiku is a very short form, but how short? And I would maintain that haiku is really a 1-breath poem. I think that's what was intended from the get-go, and it's probably the best way to approach it. So a 1-breath poem, interestingly enough, when the Japanese speak a 1-breath poem, it contains 17 on, with each on lasting the same duration of time to utter. Every Japanese poem has 17 to stay with that 1-breath rule. Does that make sense so far? So now let's take that idea of 1 breath and 17 and practice it in English. So here's a very easy thing to do with your students. We'll get close to 17. If we said the word inspirational 3 times in a row, inspirational has 5 syllables. So you can do this right at home, and I'm going to do it here for you. When I say go, we're going to say the word 3 times in succession. We're going to say the word inspirational and see if we can do that conversationally in 1 breath. Are you ready? I'll probably see your lips moving, but not hear your voices. On your mark, get set, go. Inspirational, inspirational, inspirational. was pretty easy. I did that comfortably in one breath, and I just used 15 syllables. So far we're saying, well, that's pretty good. You know, we put 2 more syllables on there. We could probably say inspirational 3 times and tack on the word haiku, and we'd have 17. Inspirational, inspirational, inspirational haiku. There, I did it. So 17 and 17, it kind of works out. But the difference now, excuse me, is that English comes in long and short syllables. So what you can tell the kids, and why we're going to argue for fewer than 17, is take a word, an English word like the word through. So through is a 1-syllable word. Well, we just use 17 English syllables with inspirational and the word haiku tacked on quite comfortably. But what if we try to say the word through conversationally in one breath 17 times? We're going to do that now. On your mark, get set, go. Through, 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 through. I'm running out of breath. I had only got the 10 throughs and I've got 4 to go. I think I just wrote a sonnet, but I'm lacking the rhyme. So what just happened with that simple example is that there isn't a 1-for-1 correspondence or an equivalency. Is that English, being made up of long and short syllables, kind of taxes that rule of one breathness or brevity. So I think that's a really good way to say to your kids, well, if there's not a 1-for-1 correspondence, what is it then? And I'm going to show you later with some poems, the best we can do, and this was one of the crazy things I did during my sabbatical year, is I looked through probably 2,000 or 3,000 haiku written in English that had been published in major journals, Modern Haiku, Haiku Society of America, and so on. And I did the unthinkable. I counted syllables. And what I came up with is a number that I think is generally agreed upon by major journals publishing in English now, is that the closest equivalent we get with English is to shoot for about 11 to 13, maybe 14 syllables, give or take. So that average really kind of addresses the idea of one breathness or brevity. So I'll show you some rules. I say rules because they're not carved in stone the way the Japanese would do it with the construction of haiku with on. But about 11 to 13, maybe 14 syllables seems to be the sweet spot for haiku written in English. There's also a difference in language based on the number of words we speaking in English use as compared to the Japanese to convey the same idea. And without going down that path, because we'll never get out of here, I will tell you that the answer is 10 or fewer words seems to be the ideal number of words. So I'm going to move on for a little bit. We'll look for that. But when I work with students of all ages, well, let me flip here. I really kind of go back to basics in terms of what is poetry. So we'll talk about poetry has, I think, there are 2 elements. It's function, and any good poem, the function is to get your reader to feel something or to understand something. In fact, here are 3 really interesting words that I'll share with kids and have them write in their notebook early on. For there to be a poem, someone is somewhere, something happens, and somebody learns something. So there's often a place, an action, and then the learning, what we refer to, the learning is the haiku moment or the aha moment in haiku. Let's take a look at a couple of things that I used to start. We good so far, Camille? Am I coming through okay? Okay, good.
Could you repeat that last thing about the someone somewhere?
Yeah, so I would say that in fact, I would share these 3 words with kids, whether they're writing haiku or sonnets or personal narrative. Someone is somewhere, something happens, and someone learns something. So we'll kind of come back to that later. A lot of what I do with kids is we workshop poems. They put them up on the whiteboard or someplace anonymously, and we kind of ask ourselves those questions. But I'm getting ahead of the game. Can you see that screen okay, everyone? Okay, so what I'd like you to do at home right now is just read through these. So these are poems that have been written, haiku that have been written and published in major journals somewhere over the last 20 or 25 years. And what I'd like you to do is take a look at those poems and pick one that someone somewhere, something happened, someone learned something, kind of holds true, but more importantly, a poem out of there that you can relate to or that you like. Okay, so just take a second and look through. Camille, do you have a favorite one there?
Out of these, I don't know why, but my eyes immediately drew to the middle of this page, and so I read The Dead Hamster. Um my son invents a religion.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's my
yeah,
favorite, but my eye was drawn to it.
yeah. That hamster, my son invents a religion. Right, right. Anybody else? I mean, somebody else just jump in. Is there a favorite from among those? Does anybody have one?
Yeah, I do. I like Creak of the Swing. My feet still reach the sky.
Nice.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
I
So
kind
if
of,
we were sitting in the same room, what we would do is we would go around. So I would give kids early on, I give them a selection of haiku. In fact, I give them this selection. And if I'm in a classroom, we each pick one and write it down with the author's name. And then we go around and recite the poem twice. Everybody gets a chance. And it's interesting, you get a way to kind of feel the pulse of the room based on what poem is repeated more often than the others. And that gives you some insight into audience, where the sensibility of your group resides. We won't do that now, but I would be fascinated to see which ones you picked, So something happens automatically. Whether it's a product of language or experience, we're drawn to one of those poems. One of my favorites is Dead Hamster too. And I could tell you the story, behind that. My personal someone is somewhere, something happened, someone learned something. But for the sake of understanding how we're going to present haiku to the kids and get them to write in something less than 17 syllables, here's what I want you to do next. And we'll talk about these at the end. I'd love to hear which ones you picked. So what I want you to do, I'll go back. Well, I can do this. We'll do this way. So what I want you to do now is take a look at the poem you picked. And we're going to try to understand now the form, because I think that's really important for kids, Believe it or not, I just did sonnets with 8th graders last week. And after a sonnet, they're gonna welcome this. We start studying haiku about this time of year in preparation for the Virgilio contest. But there's a form here. So the first thing I want you to do, if you will, is count the number of syllables in the poem that you selected. Okay, does everybody have that? Your syllable count?
Mhm.
And the next thing I want you to do in the poem that you selected is count the number of words. And then the third thing is tell me the number of lines. And the reason I bring that out is because there are some exceptions to the 3-line rule, but we'll get that's workshop 2. We'll do that next month. Okay, so how about one volunteer? The poem. Who selected the dead hamster one? Was that Kate?
I think that was me.
Okay, so let's Camille. So you're on the spot right now. How many syllables do you have?
So I have 11 syllables for that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 words and 3 lines.
3 lines. So I would say most of these poems, and you're going to find this in almost every major journal publishing English language haiku, you're going to find sort of the same form. You're going to find 3 lines. everybody's poem here probably comes down in the area of 11 to maybe 14 syllables. I would think most of these poems are 10 or fewer words. And so by looking at a lot of haiku, you can get a pretty good sense of how that form works out in English in 3 lines. So everybody with me so far? Okay, now here comes the tricky question. So there are other things with form we'll get into a little bit later, but the basics are the number of lines, the syllables, and the word count. But here's the one that baffles a lot of kids, is the question is, how many parts does the poem have? How many parts? And so anybody want to venture a guess?
2.
Any shout-outs? How many parts?
2.
Yeah, good. Is that Linda?
No, my name is Sally.
Oh, hi, Sally. Okay, somebody else is lighting up here. Okay, hi. So yeah, Sally's right. So here's the other thing is that haiku written in English and in Japanese is a 2-part poem, and so you can introduce a real interesting word there called juxtaposition, and the kids really like it, and we'll practice juxtaposition in a minute, but so it's a 2-part poem, and interestingly enough, English language haiku and Japanese haiku rely very little on punctuation, if any at all. And with every one of these poems, you can see where the break is. Creak of the Swing. Now that poem actually uses ellipsis to direct the reader, saying there's a pause there, but most of them don't. Dragonfly, the zigzag of my attention. So we feel the break. There's an element in Japanese language in haiku called a kuriji, and I can't wrap my mind around it, but Japanese write their poems linearly, and there's a break, and it's sort of built into the structure of the language. But what we do in English is we often use a construction called a fragment and a phrase, or you can flip them fragment, phrase, or phrase and fragment. Let's see. So early spring, pause, I sharpen the tip of each colored pencil. So those are the basic rules I start kids with. 3 lines, 11 to 13 syllable-ish, 10 or fewer words in a 2-part poem. So here, this is fun. So when you give them the word juxtaposition, this is beautiful. So you're going to need your hands free for a minute. All right, so let's go down here. Oh, we're going to say haiku is an imagistic poetic form. It's a juxtaposition of images, or 2 parts. So I have the kids put up their left hand, and I ask them, is that an image? And we'll go over an image in a minute, and they'll say yes. It's something we can see, we can observe with our senses. Put up our right hand, is that an image? Okay, so juxtaposition is the putting together of 2 images in an interesting way in haiku. So take your fingers right now, just fold them. Try that, just fold them. Okay, so we just juxtaposed 2 images, but it's not quite a poem yet, because there's no aha, there's no surprise. We don't learn anything new. But watch this. If you take your fingers and just shift them, now refold them and shift them. How does that feel? Aha, it feels just enough different. And so the beauty of haiku is taking what's already there and juxtaposing it in just enough of a different way to draw our attention. So haiku doesn't deal with the extraordinary, it deals with the everyday. And either through the power of language or observation, it puts 2 things together in just enough of an interesting way to give us that aha moment, which is beautiful. Another way to do it, the kids love this, is you just go give yourself a big hug, and then just big hug, and then switch your arms, and oh my God, I'm with a stranger. It feels a little bit different. So there are all sorts of ways to kind of illustrate that. Is we're simply kind of taking what's there every day and just putting it together in a way that's enough different to draw ours and our readers' attention. Okay, so this is what we just did. The parts. And by the way, when I get done here, this workshop is, if you're a teacher and you want this, I'll give you my email later, and I think I can mail this whole thing to you. And everything is here with permission. I tinker with it constantly. I'm forever changing this up. you know, I'm still on the haiku path, learning as I go. I'm still astounded by the amount of information that I still need. Okay. So, okay. So this is something, I have the kids keep a haiku journal. And so this deals with the poem, you know, so I would ask them the poem that from that list that they selected, you know, how many of the senses can they identify, and have them write them down? Sight, sound, smell, touch, and taste of, you know. When we talk about sensory images, there's also the sense of heat or cold. Up north, that worked really well on a winter day, because I usually start haiku in February, which is National Haiku Month and Black History Month. I would take the kids to a closed window and open the window and have them stand by it and say, "What do you feel?" And invariably it'd be the sense of cold. So imagistically, heat and cold is fair game. And then what I would do is always have them do a focused free write about a haiku they selected. When I read this haiku, I see, and there's a someone. Okay, I want them to tell me the story of it. And what's interesting is two people can choose the same poem, but experientially, they may it may reside differently with them, which is wonderful. You know, kind of the far-reaching effects of one poem. Okay, so I ask them what they see, and then how they feel about what they see, and then if they'd like to have any final thoughts about it. In the classroom, what we do is after they do a focused free write, we actually go around and read those and talk about it. Talk about that particular poem and what the reader brought to the table. So there's early on, there's a lot of discussion. I'm going to do a few tangents here that aren't in the workshop, but when I get the kids writing haiku, I have a big whiteboard in the room, wall size, excuse me. And what I'll do is they'll come in and put their poems up there anonymously. So we will have, once we start, every day I come in and there'll be poems on the board. And they're free to put their names, but often anonymity is really good, and then a poem will come up and we'll simply spend a few minutes talking about it. Okay, so here's a lovely definition. Haiku, a moment keenly perceived, linking human nature, was a definition that was at one time used by the Haiku Society of America. And then this, I really like, haiku is a way of making manifest that which is already understood but not so well expressed. And I think the key to haiku in terms of being life-altering is simply an attention to the detail in the world around us, things we kind of feel internally, but we never put words to. As haiku is an invitation to begin to identify those things and share them. Okay, you guys tell me, everybody. You can let Camille know if I'm going too fast. You know, I can slow this down, or you know, just jump in if you have a brief question. You know, that would be great. Okay.
So if
Yeah.
I could hop in really quickly. Kate asked, can you say more about how haiku links nature to human nature?
Oh, that's great, Kate. We're gonna look in just a minute. Okay, you're a step ahead of me there. Okay, so I will say nature and human nature. There is the observer and the observed. And so haiku by definition is sort of a nature poem. We'll look at a sort of an offshoot of haiku called senru, which is haiku-like poem that's not dependent on nature, but that's further on. But it's really simply the observer and the natural world and what we take from it. So this is very quick. It's quick review for the kids. Poems are made up of images. Images evoke emotions. You know, an image is a word or phrase that writer selects that evokes a picture in the reader's mind. Okay, so we just looked at that, you know, things in an image, and just this is it's a lot of fun with elementary school kids. well, it's fun at every age, but you know, this whole idea of you know, what's going on in the world around us. And then so I'll have them do a writing practice. I may come in and start the day and say, okay, or I'll take them outside. So here's where the nature, Kate, the nature, human nature thing comes in. When I was in Rochester, New York, the school I taught at was just a few blocks from a place called the Mount Hope Cemetery. If you're ever in Rochester, New York, it's a must see. The graves of Susan B. Anthony and Frederick Douglass are a stone's throw from one another. Rochester was just written up this week of being home this winter to probably 200,000 crows. And some winters they spend the winter in Mount Hope Cemetery. So I could walk there with the kids from school. And so we would just walk and pause, you know, and just say, okay, I see, I hear, I smell, I touch, I taste. And you can do this anytime. If you're at school, take the kids outside and just say, I want you to write down, you know, some of the things, some of the images of things around you. This one I would try with everyone at every level, because psychologists, number two, tell us that the quickest route to authentic memory is through olfactory, the sense of smell. And this is, if you're in a group of adults even, this is a wonderful conversation to have, you know, the smell that you remember from childhood. How about one person? I mean, you know, these are so rich. Who's got a smell they remember from childhood? We're going to experiment here. Who's gonna volunteer? Let me see if I can see a name here. Let's see. Is it Sari?
Okay, I mean, I don't think yeah, I mean, I didn't do anything, but okay, yeah.
I saw you smiling. Do you have a smell, from
Oh.
childhood that you remember?
Yeah, well, I for some reason, I just was thinking of magic markers. I don't know why, but I just seem to remember that in
All right.
school and it, you know, the smell of magic markers.
Okay, so I'm kind of keep you on the spot here for about 1 minute.
Sure.
Okay, so the smell of magic markers, where?
Well, in school, I just remember that.
Can you be more specific? What school? What grade?
Elementary school, I would say, is where the memory, you know, and I just remember opening them, you know, and I don't know, we probably weren't supposed to. I don't know. It was a strong smell, and it was you know. I just loved school supply, like, you know, it was because it was first, and it was fun stuff that, you know, we weren't writing essays in, you know, magic marker, so it was just it was like a good smell, and it was, you know, creativity. So I just liked it.
Was it early elementary?
Probably, maybe not so early, because I feel like it couldn't have been too early, because I feel like earlier it was crayons, so I think it was more upper elementary.
Okay, all right. So I thank you for sharing that. So I'm going to stop you there. So right away we have, you know, the smell evoking a memory, and we have the someone is somewhere. You know, so it's very, you know, in elementary school, and there's a whole story about that. So if you kind of go back to the place of that memory and who or what you associate it with, there could be haiku lurking there. You know, and it works extremely well with kids, the smell of. So I would go with that one. This one, number 4, it should say number 3. I'm going to switch that later. Number 4, which should be number 3, take kids out, and the sounds that we hear in our neighborhoods change based on the season. And that's a good one to do. And then I'll have kids in their notebook keep a place for images where they could collect images of their own, you know, on their walk to school or throughout their day. So again, early on in haiku, there's just a lot of language. So I took a workshop years ago. If you ever have an opportunity to take a really great writer's workshop, go to the Institute of Writing and Thinking at Bard College, Annandale-on-Hudson. It's a beautiful place. And a transformative workshop I took was called, the title of it was Language, Power, and Play. But the professor, the facilitator, said it would be better if we called the workshop Language, Play, and Power. It doesn't sound as great as alliteratively, but he said the key to writing, and especially with kids and keeping this fresh, is to keep it playful. To keep it playful, you know, not high stakes. And so yeah, we do a lot of that, hopefully playful writing early on, just collecting words and phrases and images. So where do images come from? Well, I think it's fair game, and I would maintain that a lot of haiku written is authentic experience, have an element of imagination in them. You know, we want to please the reader, and we take liberties, which is fine. So haiku can come from memory, imagination, and perhaps some of the best ones come from the here and now. And I think that's the direction we want to take ourselves and kids in, is how do we become more observant in the present time and in our everyday world, you know? And I can say that, you know, I'm a work in progress, but I'm getting better at that all the time, just being a little more attuned to what's going on around me. And then we did the juxtaposition thing, the power of poetry in an interesting way. So here I had a kid come up in, and I said, oh, just go out and juxtapose two images, two things that went together in an interesting way. And somebody came back and said, the little bird hopping across a parking lot. And everybody laughed. Probably a junior high class. Everybody laughed. And I said, oh, wait, let's look at that for a minute. Isn't that an amazing, I think it's a wonderful observation. The little bird in the parking lot. So that's the juxtaposition of image, but right away I'm intrigued because there's an element of nature there and human nature. Element of nature and human nature, the parking lot being human nature and the bird being nature. And there's a kind of an interesting disconnect there in my mind. And I think we would probably ask ourselves, you know, what's the little bird doing in the parking lot? Okay. So here we go. So now we're into, you know, maybe week 2 or something, and we're going to get a little more sophisticated. So when I talk about images, I'll say to the kids, okay, well, there are two kind of ways to look at it. One is comparative and one is contrasting. Comparative and contrasting images. And those are great words. What's the difference? And once there's an understanding, then we begin to look at haiku that way and say, well, are these image comparative or contrasting? And how do we create meaning through sort of both of those combinations? So this first one, Gary Hotham, who's still active in the haiku community, freshly fallen snow opening a new package of typing paper. This poem's dated. I think this one's probably 30 years old, but I absolutely love it. Now it's written in 17 syllables. Here's a perfect example of a poem cannot be nullified because it's written in 17 syllables, just as long as there's no wasted words or it doesn't feel padded to get to that point. Okay. Pretty nice comparative images, aren't there? So I think when I talked to Gary Hotham years ago, I maybe brought up this poem and this idea of starting the day with your writing practice, opening the windows and seeing the snow and the new typing paper and just saying, wow, you know, what an interesting observation. And then by extension, if I spend time with this poem, I realize that as the day goes on, the snow is going to get trampled on. And shortly after the typing paper is opened and, you know, it's going to be, so something's going to happen there. That pristine moment where both things are new is going to alter pretty quickly. Isn't that wonderful? Here's a great poem for contrasting images. Cor Vanden Heuvel, who is one of the, I would say, you know, the movers and shakers in the English language haiku movement. You'll encounter his poems. He died just maybe a month or so ago. But look at this one, Hot Night, Turning the Pillow to the Cool Side. Isn't that delightful? I mean, that's taking certainly the unextraordinary, and we've all had that experience, I would imagine. But Cor Vanden Heuvel had the common sense to write it down. Isn't that wonderful? So those are good examples of comparative and contrasting images, and that's a good conversation to have with students of haiku. Okay, so now we're getting into some of the more nuanced stuff. After we get through the initial rules, you know, the 3 lines, the syllables, the words, haiku shows it does not tell, and that's probably a good rule with any poetry. And so I will put this up, and I'll say to get, is it a haiku? And they'll quickly start counting the syllables on their fingers. And they'll look at the lines and the words and they say, well, yeah. I said, no, if we had a haiku party and this comes in, it's really masquerading as a haiku because it's a no, it's showing and not telling. So I'll have this poem go out and reinvent itself, you know. And so I was sad when I saw The Dead Cat could morph into a poem that looks like this by Michael McClintock. Isn't that shocking? Dead cat, open mouth to the pouring rain. I was sad when I saw The Dead Cat. So I'll say to kids early on, if you find yourself telling your reader what to think or feel, try to write a poem in such a way that you get your reader to arrive to that point without ever telling them. This poem's intriguing to me too, because I had a kid ask one time, whose mouth is opened? Whose mouth is opened? And I thought, I'd never seen that. I just always, in my mind's eye, saw the cat with the open mouth. And the kid said, no, it's my mouth. When we drop our jaw agape, it's something that's shocking. Isn't that wonderful? Okay, so here's our rules. So somewhere along the line, I'll go back and I'll revisit these because we can't do it this workshop, but if we all were to write and come back, we could do a revision workshop. And so it's constantly kind of circling back and going over the rules to make sure so that when we begin to look at our own poems, we have a pretty clear understanding of what the form is going to be. So, and I like the last line, a little alliteration is lovely. Okay, later on we could talk about, so simile, good place. Oh, the other thing about haiku, which is really cool, is you can teach and probably should all 8 parts of speech, and you can look at poetic devices. So I can use this as an aside if the kids don't already have an understanding of simile, talk about like and as and how you very seldom, if ever, find it in English language haiku. The difference, eventually between direct and indirect metaphor. So the haiku offers, I did actually something not too many years ago about haiku as a cornerstone to written literacy. But that's another matter altogether. But I think it could be argued that you can do so much with it that sort of transports to other forms of written expression. So as a way to go back and revisit some of those ideas, where does the break in these poems occur? We'll look at the 2-part nature, because that's the one I think most new poets struggle the most with. Another wave, the seaweed still clings to the driftwood. The second one is interesting because the break, it really depends on the reader. Is it autumn wind, louder and louder the rattle of leaves, or autumn wind, louder and louder the rattle of leaves? So I think that's in the sort of the mind's eye of the reader. And eventually we would talk about how the middle line in haiku could be kind of a fulcrum, depending on how you want to interpret it. The poem can either go 2 lines, 1 line, or 1 line, 2 lines. And we'll talk a little bit about prepositions, how if you want to create a poem that kind of can, go both ways. Prepositions in the middle line are really, really pretty cool. Okay, Camille, am I going at a good enough pace here?
Yeah, I think so. We're at 10:46 right now, so we have
Oh
time.
my goodness, we could be here all day. Okay, let's keep going. So then, I'll break some poems down and show them. I'll do more than one. This is a beautiful poem. This is one of my favorite haiku. And coming home to an empty house, so many stars. So the someone is somewhere. And the question with this one is, where is the observer? The nature image is there, the night sky, but where is the person at that moment of observation? And people see that the person at different places, I see the person just about maybe at the front doorstep, just about to open the door to go into the empty house. But look at the contrasting images, the empty house, the sky full of stars, you know, the many, the one. I mean, it just works on so many levels. It's absolutely astounding. So we'll do some, occasionally what I'll do with the kids is I'll take a poem and that's written in 3 lines and make it in 1 line, and then ask them to break it up and to do it. So just a pebble among the pebbles, a black toad, and see where, and there's no correct answer. I mean, you know, depending on how you want to render that poem. So that's a nice activity to do. Take a haiku, just write it across the page and say, okay, rewrite this as 3 lines for me. A lot of focused free writing. So what I say by focused free writing is generally it's for the student's eyes only, but there's also an opportunity to share out. And so I'll have them come in and maybe just write, you know, what have they seen, heard today that happens this time of year? Talk to me about the weather. So usually a focused free write is to get everybody kind of in the mood, hopefully to write, and we'll write for maybe 5 minutes. And then I'll ask a couple of them if they'd want to share. And sometimes this spins off into just a really interesting discussion about what's going on in the world around us. And it's kind of useful. Oh, Carolina Harden drew that for me. Okay, the 4 seasons. Okay. There's it's called a ginkgo and a haiku walk. So if you're in an area you can take walks, that's really good. I won't have kids write while I walk, but we'll just take a walk, and then when we get back, I'll ask them to jot down a few things that they observed on their walk. Okay. So this is interesting. The word you want, if you haven't heard it, this word is called kigo. And kigo is defined words or phrases that are tied to a particular season of the year. Words or phrases tied to a particular season of the year. There's been a great deal of discussion about this. Japanese haiku, to be a haiku, have to contain a kigo, or generally agreed upon word or phrase that anchors the poem in one of the, and I'm going to say it right now, 5 seasons. So haiku traditionally recognizes 5 seasons, the 5th being New Year, or the days just leading up to or immediately after the New Year. And we'll look at some of those. A tangent here is to talk about season words and redundancy. What happens if you have 2 season words in the same poem? We won't go down that path now, but I've seen people argue over that, and actually friendships fall out because some people think they're more right than others. Okay, so here goes the seasons: spring, summer, autumn, winter, and the 5th season, the New Year. It's a tradition for haiku poets to write a poem around that time of year, and that comes from the Japanese, and we've adopted that. So I'm going to go relatively quickly through these because I really do want to get to some of the real, different stuff, I guess. So what I'll do is I'll go through a journal, and the other thing, I'll go through a journal and I'll pick some poems that are in my mind sort of attached to a season, and we'll just spend time in the morning. I'll put them up one right after another and say to the kids, okay, what season of the year? What's the kigo? What's the season of the year? And tell me why. So a cold moon, a black cat's shadow slips in with the rain. What's interesting is kids, so I'm down in Atlanta now. I used to be in Rochester. There's a different interpretation depending perhaps where you are geographically, you know. So up north, kids invariably would say autumn. But down here, down in Georgia, there are quite a number of kids who will say winter, because the precipitation down here in winter is rain, and it's not snow. Okay. But, you know, they'll talk about autumn in terms of the black cat's shadow and the raininess, the cold moon. Evening rain, road pavement releases the day's heat. If that's not summer, I don't know what is. Isn't that a wonderful poem? Picking petals. She loves him enough to cheat. That's pretty delightful. Concert in the park, kids compare purple tongues. Summer? Summer, okay. Now, this is one of my favorite haiku of all time. Pamela Miller Ness used to be the president of Haiku Society of America. She lived in New York City, where it tends to perhaps rain more often on New Year than snow. New Year's rain circles in the puddle widen. And I asked Pamela about this poem, and I said, tell me about it. And she said, well, it was New Year, and it was raining, and the observation was the circles in the puddle. And I said, tell me about that. And she said, well, I watched a raindrop hit the puddle, and the circles began to widen. I said, wow, what a wonderful observation. So here's an idea of perhaps an indirect metaphor. It's a beautiful New Year poem because think about the year, January 1st, and what happens to the year as we move away from the 1st of January. Almost like those circles in the puddle, they begin to widen until the 365th day, and then the circles disappear. And what do you need? You need a new raindrop. So for me, this poem works metaphorically, but to be a haiku, it has to first and foremost be literal. If the metaphor kind of is an outgrowth of the observation, that's fine, but we try not to try too hard to make metaphor. Couple more poems. Morning mist, the church fills with the smell of overcoats. What great, you know, sense of smell or olfactory. Year's end, the weight of pennies in the mason jar. So, wow, we're moving pretty well. So there's a I don't know if you're familiar with the word, it's pronounced senru. So senru, if you apply all of the rules, you know, the 11 to 13 syllables and so on and so forth, senru are haiku poems, but they are not dependent on a nature image. At one time, if you went back not too many years, maybe 10, 12 years, you would find that most journals separated haiku and senru. There was a distinction made. But then there were too much of a gray area where people couldn't decide what was which. There were fallings out, there were arguments. And you'll find now, for example, Jim Kashian and the Red Moon Anthology, which way back in the 90s, 98, when the journal first started, made a distinction that no longer happens. They're simply considered haiku poems or haiku-like poems. Paint by number, the child's river escapes its bank. First love, my best friend's bike at her house. Ouch. So senru poems generally, just the focus isn't so much nature, but it's human nature. You know, what people do to make them people, I guess. This is a wonderful poem. Stan Forrester, there's a journal called Bottle Rockets. Stan is the editor. And he said quite literally, remember the days when you used to get the toy in the bottom of the cereal box? And I said, did your daughter really get a submarine from the bottom? He said, no, she got a toy horse, but it wouldn't have worked as well as a haiku. So he made it into a submarine. Here's a poem that I absolutely love because it's so layered. Nursing home, the man in a wheelchair near the parrot cage. I suspect I walked by, probably quite literally, that man a number of times. I worked in a nursing home when I was in high school. And so I'll stop here with the kids and say, okay, what are the comparative or contrasting images? And they're quick to point out that the man is trapped in the wheelchair in the same way the parrot's trapped in the cage. the metal nature of the structure. And then someone said one day, did the man wheel himself to the parrot cage, or did someone park him there? And I said, that's a great question. And then the kid said, well, parrots talk, and it must be lonely being in a nursing home. So I think you can take this poem in many, many directions. So the word that I would use is called resonate. Is that a good haiku kind of resonates with meaning. It extends beyond the observation. That someone somewhere, something happens, someone learns something, really comes out in this one. Table for one, the waiter doesn't light my candle. Are you kidding me? Perfect summer day, one blue crayon missing from the box. So you could argue that that's haiku, but to me, that poem tends to be more senryu-ish, because I'm curious about who's been using up the blue crayon. Family reunion. She brings stuff from the cellar. I'm going to go shut the door here. My wife just got home. I'll be right back. That wasn't bad. I was going to do this from school today, but our internet was wonky. Isn't that wonderful? Yeah. So literally, she's bringing something up for the reunion. Metaphorically, I wonder what she's about to say. Okay. Things to remember about haiku. Haiku are grounded in your senses. Try to describe what you see, touch, taste, smell, and hear. Be alert to your senses in the world around you. River fog, the creak of anchor lines from rusted tugs. I'm going to skip through this quickly. Eventually, I get into a little bit more of an academic discussion with the kids, but not for today. We look at some poems. We look at a little bit in translation, the difficulty with trying to translate Japanese to English and English to Japanese. And yeah. Here's an aside. If you want a really good book of Isa's poems, so there are 4 pillars, Japanese poetry, Basho, Busan, Isa, and Shiki. A guy, Professor David Lanoux from Xavier University in New Orleans, is probably the world's best translator of Isa. And it's worth looking at Lanoux's work, but he's on a resource later on. Some attempts to translate a good book. Historically, The Narrow Road to the Deep North was Basho's sort of travel log when he left Edo and went on his journey. Okay. This is another workshop altogether, but it's worth looking. So what I like to use haiku for is I use a couple of books that I kind of go into, a little bit of Japan and history, and it's a nice offshoot. Okay, so this is really important when you teach haiku. And here's where we get into some discussion about parts of speech, articles. So you'll see a lot of people in an attempt to squeeze out as many, get rid of as many syllables as they can, they forget articles. But it's really dangerous to do so, I think, because articles help our speech to feel first and foremost conversational. And so articles are important. But the other thing is a poem can shift ever so slightly depending on whether we use indefinite or definite article. And I'm going to show you a little bit about that in a minute. But let your students know articles are your friends. Don't eliminate them unless you absolutely have to. I asked a student who was on a trip to make an observation and write it all down and then render it as haiku. And this is a fun activity. So frozen windblown prairie, the heavy loping and breathing of a shaggy brown pony. Wow, a lot going on there. So we would do this if we were sitting together in a workshop. I would say, okay, what I want you to do, leave every word in the order that it appears here. You can't change anything. The only thing you can do is you can omit words and see if you can shrink this down to sort of that parameter of, 11 to 13, 10, and we have 3 lines. You could try it right now. And what's interesting with this activity is very seldom do the poems all come out the same. They never do. What would you eliminate from that first line? Frozen, wind blowing? Well, you have to go to the second line. And what seems to go together the best? So this is a nice activity for simply tinkering with language and making decisions. As an aside, what I would say, what I say to myself and everybody, all writing is revision. And so, even if something as short as a haiku, spend a lot of time simply revising and reconsidering your words. Nope. So a discussion is, what are the significant details in the poem Early Spring Before She Can Tie It, the balloon escapes? So a lot of conversations. And the other thing, so I'll say to you, I would say the students I have, whether they're elementary, high school, junior high, we read and read and read a lot of haiku. I mean, I'll give them poems, a sheet of poems every day. I'll give them haiku journals and say, okay, your activity today is simply, I want you to read through your haiku journal. I want you to pick 1 or 2 or 3 poems and write to me about it. I see, I feel, can you identify the someone somewhere, and so on and so forth. And what's significant to you in your mind's eye? Spring rain, each empty swing hangs above its puddle. See what's significant to you? Well, to me, it's the puddle under the swing. Someone else might say, no, it's the rain. So this is kind of cool. In so short a form as haiku, you must get right to the point and show the thing that captured your attention. The one among the many, the close-up, the general scene, the last, the first, the opposite. And so we'll look at haiku from all different angles. So I'm going to show you some. So here's the one among the many. Sunflowers, one turn the other way. Isn't that wonderful? So the one among the many is one of sort of the hallmarks of many good haiku. So you could say to your students, your writing practice for tonight is, I want you to observe the one among the many. And see, so somebody was doing a keyboard thing and there was one broken key, a piano key maybe, or something, the one among the many. All haiku are written, this is good too, even though the experience may have happened in the past, writing in present tense is really important. Emily Cornish was a student of mine back at School of the Arts where I was in Rochester, and this was her poem, Summer Cottage, the bullfrog slips my grasp. And she said, well, it's a metaphor about the passing of summer. As soon as I catch the bullfrog, it's gone. Emily Cornish, I think, is probably 40 years old now, maybe older. So here's some poems. These are Virgilio, excuse me, haiku winners that went back. These actually go back. I think, Camille, you said maybe 2000. I was at a place, it was a public arts magnet school at Rochester called School of the Arts. And so here, I'm going to show you some poems that were recognized by the Virgilio Association. Winter night, cracks in the floorboards widen. So up north, especially during the heating season, the old wooden structures, the lack of humidity dry out, and you can actually hear the houses creak. Cindy Trong was, she had immigrated from Vietnam, and she talked about that. And I said, can you write about it? And her poem about her moving here, when she came here as a ninth grader, she didn't speak English. And she wrote this poem that February, I believe, January, saying goodbye, the river flowing one way. Isn't that a beautiful way to express one's leaving? Of course, rivers deposit you into the delta and then out to the sea. And that was probably her experience being in this new country. I had a number of kids who had immigrated from other countries. One, Hannah Amaro, is from Palestine. And there's a story behind this poem, but I won't tell you now. But it's a rather shocking story. This goes back to Rochester, New York, and Mount Hope Cemetery that I told you about earlier. We could walk over to this cemetery, and Alexa, I thought she'd lost her mind, but we were in the cemetery, and it happened to be, so this year the crows are roosting in Rochester, the 200,000 crows that they estimated, I think, are near the Eastman Kodak building. Many years they will be in Mount Hope Cemetery. And these are hundreds of thousands of crows that come to roost there in the evening. And then they disperse in the day. So we went over one morning and I told the kids about the one among the many. And when the morning we went over, this was a winter morning, and there were thousands of crows in the old oak trees. They hadn't left the roost yet. And Alexa was doing this. And I said, have you lost your mind? And she said, the one among the many. And what she was doing, she was focusing on one crow that had come down out of the oaks and was sitting on the top of a gravestone. She had learned a good lesson. Fireworks, a boy nestles into his mother. So these are kids. These are this class. These were a bunch of ninth graders. Oop. And a beautiful poem. And then the question is, what's in the man's cup? Are they coins, or is it simply a reflection of the moonlight? Mm-hmm. And so here, I'm going to show you a few more, and then we'll how are we doing, Camille? How are we doing with time?
So we have about 20 minutes. I mean, 11:30 isn't a hard stop, but it's
okay. Okay,
yeah.
I could go on. So yeah, okay. Let me show you a few more. So what I found with haiku, I just did a parent workshop at my school. The sweet spot for haiku seems to be junior high kids, 7th and 8th graders, and I think I know why. The younger kids they don't know the sort of the gymnastics with language quite well enough yet. By high school, kids seem to have sprouted a critic from one of their shoulders. You know, they're a little less likely to take risks. Junior high, for some reason, they have the ability to use language in an interesting and effective way, and they still make room for other possibilities. I think that's pretty amazing. So here's a crack in the parking lot. I tightrope to the car. I would have written something about stepping on a crack and breaking my mother's back, but not Leanna. This came from a writing practice write about someone other than a direct family member. And this was about Grace's grandfather and the fishing line. Watching him when he took her fishing. Seasonal poem. Now, when Addison first wrote this poem, the poem was written the wind through the teeth of the jack-o'-lantern. So an interesting thing to do, often you'll see haiku, kids will write them, and they're actually sentences broken into 3 lines. So write a sentence and write it into 3 lines. So that's sort of a little bit of a masquerade. So the switch here was very easy. Take the wind and move it to the 3rd line. And there's the surprise. through the teeth of the jack-o'-lantern, pause. You have to go to the third line to understand what, and it's the wind. Olivia, this was about her grandmother and doing something on a weaving thingy or something, a spinning thing. Isn't that beautiful? And then we could go on and on. So in terms of language, this is good too. Very specific nouns, strong verbs. Be very, very wary of adjectives and adverbs. In fact, one of the writing practices that I do is if a kid writes a poem with an adjective or adverb, we eliminate that. You can sort of get to the sort of the bones and maybe the meat before we dress it up. So look at that poem by Olivia Babuka Black. Look at that verb clotting. Isn't that wonderful? Winter dusk, the crows clotting the wind. Night on the lake, I touch the moon. Stare of roots, I step on each nod. So we could go. We've seen some of these. There's a few more. All right, so I'm going to skip through some of these. I have tons and tons and tons, but I'll so if you're already teaching haiku or you do, I save all of the student poems, and so I have different, sort of a bank, a repository of poems, and we'll look at those. Before we do Camille, before we do the Virgilio Association this year, we will go through the Virgilio winners from way back and look at those poems.
Awesome. Sounds great.
Yeah. I love Olivia, the middle poem here, Olivia Shannon, tea leaves, she stirs them for something better. You don't like what the leaves are saying the first time through, guess what? You get to do it all over. And these are also Virgilio poems that were won. Okay. I'm just going to go quickly. I want to get to a couple other things. Oh, okay. So there are a couple of contests. First and foremost, well, Virgilio is grades 7 through 12. But if you have elementary school kids, especially, and you're interested, the contest, which will open around about the same time, is called the United Nations International School Haiku Contest. And they have divisions for elementary school. They have a couple of different language divisions. I think they have Japanese, Spanish. I think they added German. But it's a really neat contest. And if you have a student whose work is recognized, they get invited to the United Nations International School up in New York City. And the awards ceremony is really, really worth going to if you can get to it. Ooh, okay. And here were some winners from that competition. Okay. All right, I want to get onto something else here. I'm going to fly through a few of these. I want to show you. Oh, do you guys know Bart Simpson? There's actually a Simpsons, and they did haiku on a Simpson episode years ago. Okay. So there's some traditions. This is what I wanted to get to. If kids are a little lost and they need a prompt or a cue, one of the two most important images in haiku literature is the moon. And so I have everybody write a moon haiku. Everybody. So moon by itself will always be taken as a full moon of autumn, an autumn month, unless something indicates otherwise. So we all share moon haiku. And what I would give the kids is, oh, let me see here, I'm glitching. There we go. So let's look at a couple. All right. Oh, here we go. Here's one of my all-time favorite poems, The Old Field Throbbing with Insects, the Summer Moon. So I think the verb there, throbbing with insects is just, boy, that's a keeper. Doesn't say it all. Moonlit swim, the galaxy moves around me. And so this is fair game. If you, there's a book, it's called the a Haiku. See, I'll go over my shelf and get it. It's by a guy named Higginson. And what Higginson did, I'm going to go grab the book. I want to show you. Hang on just a minute. Can you all see this book here?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, it's called Haiku World, an International Poetry Almanac. William Higginson, who was one of the movers behind the English language haiku movement, he wrote this book years ago. He has since passed away. But this is what. So the Japanese, they would collect kigo or season words in a book called a saijiki. And those were words and phrases that were fair game for anybody to use. In fact, you were compelled to use one. So Higginson tried to do that, understanding the vast sort of geographical distances in this country and so on. But he put together a book which is sort of an equivalent to a Saijiki. And so he has words and phrases in here, and you can go and he will tell you what season that word or phrase is associated with. And they're fair game to use because this is language that's common to all of us, at least regionally. So I just opened to a page, and if I looked at the word common quail, let's say you're going to write a poem about a quail. Common quail, excuse me, is an autumn kigo, according to Higginson. And then if you looked up common quail in the book, he would tell you a little bit about it, what the history is behind it, and why it's an autumn kigo. So what I'll give the kids is I will give them a list of I'm going the wrong direction. Hang on. I will give them a list of words and phrases that identify the moon and one of its many renderings, and say, okay, I'd like you to use one of these. So if you want your students to write a moon haiku, you can give them this list of words and say, okay, put one of these in your poem. Because those words and phrases appear in the Saijiki, they're fair game because we all kind of agree on their utility and the fact that we all own them. So you can start them out with a word or phrase and then let them fill in the rest of the poem. Here's another fair thing to do. It's worth doing is holidays. There's a rich tradition in writing about holidays in haiku. So you have them write about those. I don't know if this is a kid's poem, but Valentine's card from an old lover, icicles drip from the eaves. Oh, baby, are you kidding me? So they want to know, well, what's that about? Especially kids down here about icicles. I said, well, it's that radiant heat energy that goes to the roof and melts the snow. And then the snow melts and drips down, and then it's exposed to the atmosphere and the icicle anyway. But there's an interesting sort of metaphor there, isn't there? It's absolutely wonderful. There's a delightful Valentine's poem. Halloween party. After a few drinks, the masks come off. Dry leaf scratches along the sidewalk, All Souls Day. And here's a few more holiday ones. So again, looping back and doing poems that either comparative or contrasting images. Those are nice poems. ING words or gerunding. We won't, that gets a little complicated, but you know, who's teaching the child to whistle? So one of the other things you can do with this narrowing the focus thing, I'll see if I can show you this. So you, sometimes what I'll do is I'll, on the board, I'll draw a pyramid. I draw a pyramid and then say, okay, 1, 2, 3 lines. And I'll say, for this poem, I want you to start with the specific and allow the poem to open up to the general. So start with something and then open it up. And then I'll flip the pyramid and say, okay, start with the general and move to the specific. And see which of those constructions works best. The whole sky in a field of flowers, one tulip. So that's the inverted pyramid sort of model, which is fun. And it's worth doing with one's own poetry, is saying, well, what is the order of images here? What works best? Where's the aha? You know, where do I want to take my reader? Pun and humor. Hard to do, but it's fair game. This one, headstone, a dash between the years. That's one of my all-time favorites. You know, so it has to work literally, and of course it does on a headstone, but look at the word dash. You know, warm night, a soda machine rejects my coin. There is a tradition, probably the best person who's tackled this the best is John Stevenson. John Stevenson is the chief editor of the Heron's Nest Journal. You could write this down. If you do not know John Stevenson's video called My Red, please take a look at it. Okay, it's called My Red, and it's by John Stevenson.
Got it.
But make sure, you got to put his name down, because if you just put My Red, you'll get all sorts of stuff. But it's an absolutely beautiful, beautiful video, and it's comprised of his haiku and some wonderful images and a story behind it. You can play with word and place names. Old Faithful, the crowd arrives right on time. It's pretty cool. There are 3 sort of kind of underpinnings, Sabi, Wabi, and Eugen. Look for mystery, austere beauty, and loneliness in haiku. We won't do this right now, but there's, we talk about, eventually I want the kids, maybe a little older, to understand the difference between a direct and indirect metaphor. There's a tradition, I think it's pronounced Gendai, or non-normative haiku. You'll see in many journals now, you'll see one-line poems written. I think it's in an attempt to sort of mirror the construction of Japanese haiku. I think they're hard to do. I don't think they all work, but My Head in the Clouds in the Lake works. My head in the clouds in the lake. Between statues, the rest of history. The day now burnt out fireflies. I think there's another one here. Oh, people experiment. So the beauty of haiku in English is it's still a relatively early form. Probably the first person to begin figuring it out was Jack Kerouac. There's actually a book called Kerouac's Haikus. Tell the kids not to put an S on it, please. Although Jack Kerouac did. But look at this one. This is a vertical coup. Against the blue fly flies against the pane. Where is the fly? Do you all see where the fly is? The fly is inside trying to get out. It's flying toward the light and keeps hitting that glass, that pane. Isn't that beautiful? Cor Vanden Heuvel, there's this poem, you have to envision this on a white sheet of paper and just a word in the middle. The one word is tundra. That's it. And people argue and argue, is that a haiku? Well, Cor Vanden Heuvel said it was, so I'll take his word for it. But so there's still an argument over what is haiku in English? I think one of the things that's kind of cool about it is it's still a form that's evolving and finding its footing. Here's a 2-line haiku. In the woodpile, the broken axe handle. Oh, love the irony. What goes between Goethe and Graves? Oh, this blows me away. The author's name, Gorman. Whoa, it took me forever to figure that out. I may have not have done it. I think a kid did. It's alphabetically, it's the author's name. Is it a haiku? Do you see the 2 words, fossil and silence? My fingerprints on the dragonfly in the amber. Okay, so sort of to wrap things up a little bit, simple, uncomplicated images, common language, objective presentation, musical sensitivity to language. I don't have the name of the article, but Pamela Miller-Ness, who I mentioned earlier, there was an essay she wrote years ago called Haiku and Prosody, and the importance of sensitivity to language, because it is a poem after all, and whatever we can do to allow it to appeal to the ear is in everyone's best interest. And then I'll just blast through this. This would be another whole workshop. If we were to come together again as a group, we would each bring a poem or two, and we would actually begin to do workshopping the poems. And in my classes, we do a lot of that. The kids they can submit the poem anonymously. We'll put it up on the whiteboard or something, or on the big screen, and we'll actually talk about it. And conversation to have with kids is don't be thin-skinned. We practice the art of critique. How do you say what you need to say in a kind and meaningful way? But honest critique is worth its weight in gold. And what's interesting about the art of revision is occasionally I'll throw a poem up there anonymously that I'm writing or I've written, and it doesn't always go over well. The kids don't know it, but they're going to critique the poem in an honest way. So the first time you read your work, discover what you need to write about. What ideas or facts did you miss in the writing? Another good thing to do with haiku is if a kid writes one or if I write one, is try to write it 2 or 3 or 4 different ways. Switch up the line, switch the word order. David Lanoux, who I mentioned from Xavier University, who's the ISA translator, he has a wonderful novel, by the way, called Haiku Guy. It's really a fun novel. And basically, one of the lines is, nothing is in the picture that's not of the picture. I'll get the picture. In other words, what did you leave out? What else might be in that moment in time that's worth revisiting? Does your haiku say what you wanted to say? Would you understand what you meant if you were not the writer? And then here we go. All writing is revision. Could your images be presented in a better order, a more effective order? Remove all modifiers, prepositional phrases, and get to the main subject, verb, object, heart of the poem. Then one by one, insert modifiers. This is a good place to actually talk about if haiku is the juxtaposition of 2 images, What if I have three? And here's where prepositions come in very handy. And you can demonstrate this. So if I say, all right, I point to here and I say, what's this? And the kids will say, well, it's a bald head. Okay, it's an image, yes. And then I'll say, well, what's this? And they'll say, well, it's your cell phone. Okay, so I have two images. How do I effectively make them one with the preposition? So I'll put the phone up here and say, okay, where's the cell phone? It's on your bald head. And so the two images with the preposition are united, actually form one image, and you get a little more room to maneuver there if you're clever with your prepositions. Okay, revise for audience. Billy Collins, who actually writes some haiku. It's a nice definition. Okay. And here's some, so in to honor Nick Virgilio. And if you're not a member of the Virgilio Association, there's a plug. Please, it's a wonderful, wonderful organization. Does so much in terms of for the community, for haiku. Anyway, Nick Virgilio, wonderful book of his poems. Here's some of my favorite Virgilio haiku. Heat before the storm, a fly disturbs the quiet of the empty store. Turning town barber pole stops turning autumn nightfall. Autumn twilight, the wreath on the door lifts in the wind. So I think Nick Virgilio lost one of his brothers, I think in Vietnam. And he's written quite extensively about the loss of his brother. Oh, here it is. My dead brother hearing his laugh and my laughter. It's maybe one of his most famous haiku. Bugs, bass picking bugs off the moon. Beautiful. It's a good one. And this is probably his most famous haiku. Okay. Resources. Jack Kerouac. Many people maybe don't realize is Richard Wright. What is it? Native Son and Black Boy, two novels. When he left the United States to live in France, he actually spent, I think, the last 6-8 years of his life writing haiku. And there's a book of Richard Wright's haiku. And many of them are written in the sort of the 575 format, but not all. I think he began to kind of figure out that it didn't always work with that structure. So here are a couple of my favorite from Richard Wright. In an old woodshed, the long points of icicles are sharpening the wind. Entering my town in a heavy fall of snow, I feel a stranger. And here's Kerouac. A couple of my favorite Kerouac haiku. In the medicine cabinet, the winter flies died of old age. So it works. I would say, it's a sentence. So I might have somebody rewrite it, but heaven forbid I'm not messing with Kerouac's haiku because, frozen in the bird bath a leaf. Here are a few resources. If you, one of the best journals out there is Modern Haiku. Paul Miller is the editor. If you're not a member, Haiku Society of America, they have a journal that comes out 3 times a year. As a member, you can submit your poems. They do wonderful things. There are workshops around the country. One coming up this summer in California called Haiku North America. The Haiku Foundation. If you don't know about the Haiku Foundation, Jim Kashian, whose name's come up a few times in this presentation, it's free, it's online. Jim Kashian also is the founder of Red Moon Press, a lot of great haiku materials. And you can get absolutely, Haiku Foundation, the resource, they're second to none for your students and for yourself. Nicholas Virgilio Haiku Association. And here's a plug for the journal that I'm associate editor of, is the Heron's Nest. If you want to submit work there, you get to choose from one of 5 associate editors with whom you kind of create a rapport. and then there's a selection process. So we just finished up it comes out quarterly. So I think collectively, the 5 editors, we received about 1,000 haiku, about 200 each. And we will eventually narrow that down to 123 poems that go into the issue. So a lot of good poems come our way. Okay, cool. I think that's probably a good place for now to stop. So let's do this. Actually, I can keep the PowerPoint up. So Camille, help me here. What do we want to do?
So I think we should go back and get some of those questions. Let me make sure I scroll back far enough to make
Yeah.
sure there were some really good ones in there.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
So Kate had an early question about linking human nature or how you link haiku to human nature. I think you've covered that.
Okay. Yeah. I think. Yeah. The best way to do that is the someone is somewhere, and then the human nature is you, the observer, or your observation of someone in a scene.
Mhm.
Now, one thing this is kind of tricky too, is we can talk about our personal experience or observation, but we cannot safely render the experience of another. We can't know exactly what they're thinking, and kids often will do that, and so that's something to be aware of. Okay, but keep going, Camille.
So we have which one is right after that? Somebody said something about how about the use of ing in haiku? Is that acceptable or to be avoided? You did mention the gerund phrases, but
Yeah.
I think it's acceptable then.
It's perfectly fine. Yeah. I mean, there's discussion around personal pronoun I.
Mhm.
If I went back maybe 20 years, that was frowned upon, not so much anymore. So again, this is sort of evolving and changing. A lot will depend, especially if you're submitting your work, on the particular journal and editor. What flavor of haiku they like.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And then next we have, is there a Japanese word for the 5th season?
If there is, I don't know it.
Okay.
That's my homework. Yeah, that's a great question.
Um, let's see, most submissions. Okay, this one says, do you include Kigo in the first lesson or focus on the 3-line syllables word count 2-part thing? So I guess they're wondering if they're teaching to somebody, do I include Kigo in the first lesson?
I don't right away, that comes later. So the first thing I do, if it's form and function, the Kigo is kind of puts a foot into the function area, So I would say the first, the form thing is so. How do you wrestle with this idea of only 11 to 13 syllables, 10 words, 2 parts, and you got to make some meaning? And here's the beauty of haiku. I think all good writing does this thing, condense and compress. How can we say more with less? I know what I wanted to show you. Can I, let's see here. I'm going to share a screen with you. Y'all, okay, let me just get out of here. All right. I'm going to try to get rid of my PowerPoint. I want to show you an activity that, all right, for some reason, I am, okay. I just made you all go away. Hang on, I'm going to bring you back. All right. Just give me a second here. Wow. All right. Okay, let me try one more time here. All right, good. All right. I'm going to try to share a screen with you. All right. Can you see that screen right now?
Yes.
It says Meredith Scott.
Mhm. Yep.
Can you all see that? All right. So here is, I think this may be, okay. So get rid of Meredith's name. I told her she'd do this anonymously. So this assignment, I'm gearing up for haiku now. I won't jump into it until we get back from break, maybe mid-January or January. In the meantime, I'm going to direct some writing practices that are kind of in that kind of flavored like haiku. So this writing practice was, and I say writing practice, there's no right or wrong. What I do is you just write. The kids could either write a short personal narrative or a poem, and I'll give them prompts, and they're kind of random. I have a whole list of them. I may literally pull them out of a bag. So this was either to write about an experience you recall with a relative, someone other than a sibling, a parent, an extended relative, write about the color red, or write about a sound you remember. And you could write either a poem or a narrative. And the poem had to be, I don't know, 10 or 12 lines or something at least, and the narrative 150 words. So Meredith wrote this autumn afternoon. Okay, I remember hiking up the hills with my family beside me, the Japanese maples surrounding us, and the tulip poplar towering overhead. A warm wind drifts against my skin, enveloping me in the feeling of joy. The trees hide the sky while we walk in our tree bubble until the bubble burst in the clearing, the sky full of clouds. That's pretty nice. This is a seventh grader. So I'm looking now early on when the kids write this way, I'm looking for some guinea pigs. And because this is going to be a lead up to haiku. So the activity, so have the kids write narratively. Then what you do, the activity is called pointing. And you can do this pointing activity with a whole group of kids. Like if Meredith read her piece, we would have kids, everybody would listen, and then they would say back to Meredith words or phrases that struck them. And so we did that. And then Meredith, what she did is she highlighted the words and phrases that the kids said back to her. Interestingly enough, the vast majority of those words or phrases will be images, because that's what sticks in our mind. That's what creates the pictures. So Meredith, the words that the kids said back to her: hiking, hills, Japanese maples, tulip poplar, warm wind against my skin, trees hide the sky, our tree bubble in the clearing sky full of clouds. Pretty cool. Then Meredith, I asked her to take those words or phrases and pull them out of the narrative, write them down on the page. This kid has never seen haiku before. I explained it to her, a haiku crash course, maybe 10 minutes. And I said, I want you to, I gave her a little handout. So I want you to take, remember that someone is somewhere, something happened, someone learned something. I want you to take images out of there and apply those rules and create a haiku. This is what she wrote. Hiking the hills, the drift of warm wind against my skin. I'm already knocked out. There are so many possibilities in that narrative, so many directions, or that poem, so many places she could have gone. But this is what kind of resided in her mind. The someone is somewhere, is hiking up the hills. Something happens, the drift of warm wind, and her learning was the way it felt against my skin. Isn't that beautiful? So I would say take other aid. Here's another one. So Mayfair, she went in a different direction. She makes a good guinea pig too. So know who those kids are. They'll model for you. So she decided to write narratively for that same assignment. I remember the small town in Pennsylvania. Okay. So there's hers. So the pointing, what words and phrases? Small town, cold winds, trees shake, crimson leaves. So she was writing about oh, by the way, when I asked them to write about the color red, I said, you may not use the color red. You may not say the word red. So she's got crimson in there. The This is a story of something she remembers about her grandmother in the burial. Black velvet dress, the grandma's name, fire pit dove. I asked her to do the same thing. Grandma's funeral in a small town, a blue box of ashes. That's, to me, that's already a done deal. I mean, that's a wonderful poem. And then you go back and you can find those things right there in the narrative. And then so we go through and then just say, okay, do you have, pretty close. Okay. All right, yeah, we can come back. So there are all sorts of ways to go about it. You go out into nature, you can have the kids write narratively and pull language. Yeah, Camille, more questions?
So somebody says, do all haiku need a kigo?
No, that not anymore. And I
Okay.
say not anymore. There, at one time, people would argue about it. David Lanoux, who wrote, who I mentioned a couple of times, he's got a series of books, Haiku Guy. There's a trilogy, and then there's one called Haiku Wars, which is a riot. It's actually based on a Haiku North American conference that occurred in New Orleans, and people didn't literally go to war, but they almost did over these very issues. People will argue about anything.
Clearly.
Yeah.
That's even over something as peaceful as a haiku. My gosh.
Well, don't even get me started about that. But anyway, yeah, that's a good question. I don't think so.
So somebody else says, also, do you consider points in the life cycle part of the seasons? I guess as you're talking about seasons in haiku, could a life cycle also represent that? That was Kate.
Yeah, I think so. Now, I wonder what the writer means by life cycle.
I'm assuming human life cycle, but I don't know. I don't know.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. So that's actually a great question. So Disney figured that out, right? The circle of life. Circle of, well, I'll say to the kids, okay, so think of the seasons this way. Spring is the season of birth. Summer is the season of fullness. Autumn is the season of decline. And winter is the season of death. I'll ask them, and what season do you think I'm in? And you better not say winter, And they'll put me in autumn, but okay, now, all right, I'm in autumn. I can agree with that. Am I early autumn, middle autumn, or late autumn?
Right.
They all put me in late autumn, so I don't know. I can't. But no, the seasonality of it, and I'll ask them where they are as junior high kids. Well, we're not in. Maybe we're in spring. Maybe we're in summer. They don't know quite where they are. But that's a great way to think about it.
That is really.
Yeah.
Rafi says these poems are so emotive. She was talking about when you had the students' poems up on the screen.
Yeah.
How long does it take students to arrive at these final gems?
Fantastic question. Every one of us has to give ourselves permission to write a lot of, I was going to use a bad word, a lot of bad poems. I've got a thing called Haiku in Progress, my own haiku. It's loaded. Eventually, the poem, some of them will go the way of the passenger pigeon, right, into extinction. But I'll sit with them for a while. So, I mean, I think Basho wrote thousands of poems, and scholars will say he's got, quite a few good ones, maybe a few great ones. But yeah, what I tell the kids is, give yourself permission to write a lot of terrible poems. And not by intent, but you kind of stumble into this. If you write enough and you revise enough, eventually you'll get a gem. Yeah.
Good question from Rafi. Can you say more about Spanish haiku? We've done this with the next student. Seems much harder because of the added syllables of a Romance language. And that's also interesting for, I think, MBHA, because we live in a community that is half Spanish speaking, really. So it's something to consider.
It's something to consider. I don't know too much about it. I think if you go to the Haiku Foundation, that resource, I think there's a resource there Rafi for Spanish, haiku. So yeah, Spanish, that's actually true. More words, more syllabic, I think, or something that makes it harder to kind of rein it in. So I think maybe when we're talking about English language, maybe that sort of rule about 11 to 13 syllables is relaxed a bit, in Spanish. I think Haiku Foundation, actually, if you go to Red Moon Press, that's Jim Kashian. He's the person behind the Haiku Foundation. I think he has a couple of books published by Spanish-speaking haiku poets, and there's translations there. And let me know. If not, I know there's stuff out there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I think that's it. I want to say that's it. At least for the chat.
Okay. Yeah. Well, guys, I hope this has been helpful. It's fun talking about it. I'm still learning as we go, and still write a lot of horrible poems. So every once in a while, one clicks, right?
Yeah. Well,
Good. All right. So what do you think? Camille, if this, depending on what you hear, if we want to do this again sometime, I don't know how likely it is we could do an actual workshop, but it's a lot of fun. If people bring haiku in progress, and there's a lot you can demonstrate simply through this art of revision. Things open up that we don't necessarily see on our own, which is really a wonderful, a good thing to be a member of a community of writers who have kind of a common goal.
someone said in the chat, Christine said that an interactive workshop would be appreciated. Yeah, I think that would be a good one. So maybe we can make a part 2 to this, and we'll have to get it on the schedule, Tom. Whenever.
Yeah, well, we can going down the road, we can figure that out. And the other thing is, if you I'm still teaching full time. If you're in a school, or you have you have a haiku group, and you want somebody to come in person.
Yeah.
I like doing that. So that would be pretty cool. There's a lot of cool workshop stuff you can do. I've got a haiku workshop about haiku and birds. I have one, let's see, about haiku and landscape. So kind of all these different ways of approaching it. There's a rich tradition of birds and haiku if you're a bird watcher.
Yeah, we'll have to talk at
In
some.
fact, I'll put in a plug. If you there's a thing in North Carolina. It's called the John C. Campbell Folk School, and it's in Brasstown, North Carolina. It's a wonderful place. Get their catalog. They do all sorts of everything from blacksmithing to weaving to music courses. But I do 2 courses there. One is a birding course, and the other is we're going to do it next year. It's a hybrid birds and haiku. Okay, course. So our focus will be to bird watch, but also to write haiku about birds and stuff. So anyway.
Yeah, we'll have to. That all sounds really cool, especially as we talk about ginkgos and stuff. When we do ginkgos here, and we're trying to reimagine how we do it and keep people interested. And
Yeah.
so there's a
Yeah.
lot up there. Okay.
Can you
Cool.
share your email, please?
Yeah. So all right, everybody. It's T painting, just like painting a picture. 51 at gmail.com. And yeah, if you just make sure if you email me, reference this so I know what I'm, and I can share this. I'll just send you the PowerPoint as is, and I may have some other resources, In fact, I know I do. So
Awesome.
I think if we all can spread the word about why no 575, I think we do haiku a favor. I really do. I think it's otherwise we become beholden to the syllable count and often miss out on the meaning.
I agree.
That's my Sunday sermon.
Yeah. For anybody who missed church today,
Right.
we really appreciate it. I know everybody
Thank you.
in this
Yeah,
session.
thanks, guys. Thanks for giving up a Sunday. All
Absolutely.
right.
Everybody keep an eye out for an
Thank
email. I
you.
am going to add this to a link to this session, and also Tom, I'll put the PowerPoint into that follow-up email as well, just to make it easy for everyone to have
Oh,
that.
good. Okay, I can just send it to you then?
Sure, absolutely.
Absolutely. Fantastic. All right, and keep me let me know about your haiku journeys. If you do stuff with your students, and I'd be very curious to know how you're doing. If if you ever get down the path and stray a bit, give me a shout. I'd be glad to talk to you about it.
Perfect. All right.
Okay. All right.
So-
Bye, everyone.